Hi everybody, I'm looking at a QAM signal on an oscilloscope. Basically I'm off work today, I'm not feeling all that well, but I thought I'd do a quick little thing about an older scope versus a newer scope. And the scope above is a DPO 3000, it's 100 megahertz 4-channel. This will do decoding, various types of decoding, and has a fast acquisition system. Versus an older scope, quite a bit older, 1995. This 500 megahertz scope up below, 4 input channels, but you can get the 3000s up here and 4 input channels as well. The signal I'm looking at is it's really, I don't know a lot about them, but it is a serial signal, but instead of it being just ones and zeros over here on the edge, you can see it has multiple levels. And if we change if we go to acquire, and what can I do with this? Right now I got it in high resolution mode. I could change it to sample, it becomes a little blurrier. Put it back there. I also have the bandwidth set to 20 megahertz, so it's at 100 you can see it gets a little bit blurrier. But this is a fairly aggressive signal to look at. It seems to me under the acquire system though, if I turn the persistence off, you can see that it looks like just a mess. I've actually got triggering on channel 2, but when you do how did I do that just now? Acquire, if you turn persistence back on, then you can see that in fact you have 8 levels of a signal, which gives you more tokens for a higher token rate, I guess, or something like that. The signal source is my trusty Quick Start 8. It's upside down, but it's a Quick Start 8 board, and I'm using the QAM signal with the glare will work, QAM and clock for the QAM. Tongue twister. And so actually the first time I saw one of these DPO 3000s, I didn't know what it was. It was in a surplus store, and it was just a front end that didn't have the label on the top there, and had the BNC inputs, but looking from the side, it was really no deeper than the white front bezel, and so I just ignored them. Then after a couple of weeks, one day I realized that the BNC inputs stop on the board, whereas I'd been used to working on these kind of scopes on the bottom, where you got acquisition boards and processor board and so forth going all the way to the back. So I thought, oh my god, these are actually full-fledged scopes. They just don't have the final markings on them yet in the power supplies, and so $50 a piece. It's a good deal. But anyhow, this is using the 6139A. These are kind of the gold standard in 500 megahertz probes. And this is the newer B type, which is a plastic case, but the performance otherwise is the same, I guess. I think the B one has more safety standards that it conforms to. It may be just this one particular B probe, but you can see if I move it around, it's very willing to move around, and it kind of makes a mess on the screen. But I think it might be loose. I think it might be this probe is defective, whereas the A's don't do that. And the probe tips between the 6139A versus B are different. The parts don't interchange. So this scope above, I would think you'd spend somewhere in the probably $1,500 or above for on eBay, for example, probably closer to $2,000. It's a lot more powerful than the TDS 3000s C that are currently made but are so popular, Tech kind of has to keep them. And we'll see if we can we'll compare this display up here with what we can get on the 744A. I did a video a while back where I looked at the 744A. One thing to note on the 744A is it boots up way too fast. There's a dip switch in there in position 3, I think it was. If you flip that to the off or on position, whatever it's not now, it'll do a fast boot, which is what this is doing. Normally there'd be a lot of self-testing. It would take forever for this thing to boot up. It's not doing that, so someone's flipped that. But the service manual on this scope says, and this is a 744A, the service manual says to have it in that position, so when you see a scope like that, that's perfectly kosher. But if you were to get like a 744 or 754C, for example, that switch shouldn't be flipped, and then you probably got a seller who's trying to cover a problem. When you see flip dip switch 3 flipped on this scope or the TLS 216s, that's normal, but pretty much everything else, it means that a seller did just enough reading to figure out that if they flip that switch, their scope won't do any actual power on testing. And so you're probably dealing with a flake when you run into that. So anyhow, let's see what we can do see if we can get this scope, which, you know, is probably a $400 or $500 scope on eBay if you keep your eye out, maybe as high as $750. Again, on these guys, the lower scopes, the big deal with these is the attenuators go bad and then you have to fix them. So, see if we can get the camera on it. Ah, shoot, I should have done one thing different first. I should stop the acquisition so it's on the screen so I remember what it looked like. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna, for now, we'll turn channel 2 on as well. We'll do menu. We'll select channel 2 as our trigger source. Let's see if it'll keep channel 2 as our trigger source if I hit auto set. Nope, it wants to use channel 1, so I'll have to manually do it. So trigger menu, channel 2, we'll tell it to set 50%. I don't know if that's working out. Ah, that looks triggered there. So let's make channel 1 bigger and bigger, and we can just put them on top of each other. There's probably well, anyway, let's do InstaView. Let's see what happens, because remember we got 8 different levels of transition now as opposed to typical serial, which would be 2. Let's see if the scope can handle it. Don't look too promising. Vertical position, go up, turn channel 1 off, or oops, I didn't mean to do that. What I meant to do is channel 2, turn channel 2 off. Let me do it in oh, this scope, I'm thinking the wrong kind of scope. This scope works differently. There's an actual, you select channel 2 and then you do a waveform off. That turns it off. Now InstaView. Takes a while, slower architecture. Now let's go through our cut down our bandwidth. Let's see if that helps. Vertical menu. Bandwidth is full. Let's go 20. Now we're getting closer. See if we can bump the scale up a little to get a little more detail. I want to change probably on the vertical fine scale. That's what I want. Actually, let me just type it in. 250, what are we, millivolts? Damn. Wait a minute, and then enter. That's what you're. Oh, I'm typing it all wrong. 250 milli. I got it. Oh, okay, I got to do shift first. 250. Where's the shift key on this thing? Shift. millivolts. There we are. Now I press enter. It's getting closer. This scope may not be able to handle this signal. Let's see. Let's go shift acquire menu. Now before I think I was using high res. Let's see if high res will do it on this one. This rule precludes the use of certain modes, so it won't let you do it on this scope. That's too bad. Ain't gonna help. Envelope won't work any better either. Yeah. Yep. So for this particular signal, this is probably as good as it gets. Anything else we can think of? Bandwidth's there. Yeah, it didn't keep my signal on the top, did it? No way. Yeah. So anyway, so if we stop this, like it says, it's done 5.1 million acquisitions on the top. So going back to our top scope. A lot of camera movement, sorry about that. So bottom display on something that's a 20-year older design versus the new. Let me get another scope out. I don't know if the get another scope going here. On another video I talked about TDS 3000s and kind of their comparisons, and I said that they were going down in price, but the past year actually they've held their value really remarkably well. I'm not really sure why. I mean, last year I think you could have actually gotten them for a little less. I don't know if they just got more mention in the forums or what have you as being affordable, so people start buying them more so, but so let me get this thing going and then I'll so if I stop that, I'm not real sure. Ah, it went away again. It shouldn't be going away if it's on stop. Oh well. It's kind of a... I'm not sure why it's doing that. Talk to tech. So the 3000s, this is a B, and see if I can aim that a little higher. Yeah, I'll hold it up there once. Yeah, I'll just hold it. Alright. So channel 1, channel 2, let's do an auto set. Make that scale a little bigger. There's going to be somewhere on this thing a trigger menu. I got to find it. Looks like it's going to be in here somewhere. Menu. Set the trigger to there. Set the level. There's probably a 50% switch somewhere. Yeah, right there. Okay, so now we're kind of done with the trigger. It's triggering. So turn off. How do I turn this one off? I think you just press it twice, don't you? Oh, there it is right there. Okay, now bring that on the screen. We're gonna have to get any sort of a view on this. We're gonna have to Alright, how do we get this thing to get out of this menu? The scope ain't working right. Look at that. Oh, there it is. There's a menu control. These scopes are all like the TDS 7000, and much of the menu is shared with this TDS 3000, but from the 3000 to the DPO 3000 in the back, the menus between those two are virtually identical. I mean, they're very similar menus. So I go to the I want channel 2 off, so it's off now. Menu here. I would like to change this to bandwidth. I want it to go down to there. Menu off. And so it doesn't look to me like this scope is going to be able to handle this signal. Arms. Yeah, it just can't handle it. So that's as good as it gets with this guy. You can you might be able to turn the there's probably a display menu on this thing somewhere up here. That actually makes it easier to see a little bit. We could try increasing the oh, that helped. Maybe that's what I should have done with this scope. So I don't think you can play with the persistence on this guy though when it's in that mode. So this is similar. So we got our steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So same number of steps. If I change fine scale on this one, I will have to what was it before? It was at 250, I think. Looks like 250 will be too much for this one. About there, change so we're going to use that one as a reference. So that's pretty good. Probably better than the DPO on the bottom. But I think I can change the persistence on this guy. So let's stop this one at the top with the run stop switch. Let's find out if I remove stuff, does it? It stayed. Okay, so now we're back to the bottom guy. So we're gonna hit the run switch. It's running. Now, let's see if we can get it to do, okay, in the vertical menu, not the vertical, well maybe the vertical. No, we want the acquire, so we're going to go shift, acquire. It's doing the repetitive thing. I don't think it'll let you come out of it. If you do real time, it's just going to go, oh, it did, okay. So whereas on this one we got a display infinite persistence. Let's do variable persistence. Let's see what happens with. I think it's that switch. That helping at all? If we want to decrease it, that way increased it. Yeah, it's just too blocky. On this scope, again, the color temperature on this compared to the later ones like the 754C and the Ds, this would This would have been this would have been the better scope by far than the others, but it just doesn't have the color temperature grading on this scope like on the others, on the later ones. So that was an improvement on the later scopes. But as far as glitch detection, like I showed you in another video, this, in fact, we can do something with that. Just to get back to it. Let's see, get rid of this probe. That's kind of cool. Alright, so let me see if I can make my little tri-stand hold. Come on. Something like that. Alright, so this is the probe I want. Pardon my reach. This probe can be my secondary probe. So, how do the scopes compare as far as glitch detection? This scope, we hit auto set on the bottom scope while it's doing its thing. And again, my glitcher doesn't always work, so I may have to hit the glitch again to make it do something. Oh, it's not going to do anything if I have both parts of the probe attached to ground. So let's do the auto set again. So we can see there's some glitching that's definitely going on, and again, if you weren't in a fast acquisition mode like this, you definitely would not see it. Now let's take a look at the same signal, set up the same way on the DPO on the top, and of course it's not nearly as powerful of a waveform acquisition system, and presumably both of these scopes, a waveform is 500 points from end to end of the gradical area, you know, then the various levels. So 500 samples. It's, you know, that's kind of a mystery point that most manufacturers really don't talk a lot about what a waveforms per second, what that really means. I mean, is it little strips of what you're seeing, you know, anywhere from what they're claiming, 100,000, 400,000 to a million, or is it 500 points, or is it, you know, 10,000 points across? Probably not 10,000, you can be assured. So, and I think there's things that we can do to make this thing actually, like if we persist on this one, we want persist to probably be, persist, we probably, how on earth do I change it on this scope? Okay, there we go. So we make it kind of long. There's a little glitch that just popped up. I don't know if the way I got the camera, if you can see it, but you know. So anyway, you look down here and you see there's all kinds of stuff going constantly, and then you can see on this guy, and this is what I'd advocate that you do on other scopes. You know, just because a manufacturer says they can do a bazillion waveforms per second, that doesn't mean a thing. You have to put the scopes next to each other, show them the same signal, and go, have at it, guys. See what happens. So we'll get rid of this dude up here. And now let's look at the 3000. So I think this guy is supposed to do, well, they said when this came out 400,000 waveforms per second, but then they backed off on later scopes to 200,000. So this guy is something like 3,500 waveforms per second, I think. But in the short fast trigger mode, there may be a faster mode in this one, but you got to find your way to it. I should probably have played with that, but let's go with this guy for a second up here, then I'll go back to that one last time, then I'll be done. So this scope, and so there's some glitches going on. I can increase the waveform intensity so we can see them a little bit better. But you can see that quite a bit's going on this particular display. The persistence is a little bit different between the two scopes. also the scaling's a little different. Let's see if I... So, but I would say that this guy's no slouch compared to this guy, but the main thing I would say is as far as capturing those, oh, what do they call it? They got their words they like to use, infrequent events or transient events, you know, things that are unexpected. I would say that this scope for a hobbyist on a budget is a damn good scope. And you wouldn't, the only reason you'd feel sorry for yourself using this as opposed to this is this guy up here can do various types of serial decoding, you know, that this scope can't. But on the other hand, you can buy little USB modules that allow you to do that, and how often, there are very few people that are probably daily doing that, so most of the time you're using it as an oscilloscope. Again, you take it off and the signal goes away. Oh, what it's doing is when I'm taking the probe away, it's going to the very last acquisition. And on that funky waveform of the QAM signal we were looking at before, the last transition is just, you know, a level change, so it's nothing impressive. So on this thing, I do recall that the 3000s had some sort, let's change the scale a little bit so it's more like the others. Very persistent, okay. This thing had a fast trigger capability of some kind. Maybe under trigger, I don't know. But it may have automatically been selected though when you're in the shorter memory record length. It's got wave alert, which I've never found to be particularly fantastic to use, but it does have it. Horizontal. Fast trigger. Okay, so is this thing running even? Okay, there we go. So now we're in fast trigger. Make the scale a little bigger. Hope the signal it's still got persistence is set. So this is the fast trigger. This is supposed to be able to see all the stuff that's going on there, and you can see that 3000 is pretty anemic. The 3000, I know it has, like, you can get like there's some template software, you know, where you're, oh, I forget what, the limit software, where you can build templates around your signals. Things are going on, they're just really faint. That's what's happening here. You know, I mean, there are some applications modules I think you can get for this scope that would be superior, you know, if you needed it, that the back scope can't do. And of course this scope can't do any of those sorts of things. Display, there's a brightness control on, oh, waveform intensity on the right, it has a dedicated key. So if we turn the waveform up, now it's a more even, not an even playing field, but you can see that you could do something with the tedious 3000 as far as glitches. It's faster than, like, if you're running this scope and you're not in InstaView, or like your inexpensive Riegels and, you know, the tedious 1000s and 2000s and so forth. When you're doing this sort of an acquisition where you're only doing, you know, 150 to 200 waveforms per second update on the screen, the glitches that are occurring, they just are invisible, so you think that that your signal's okay, and really if you got a signal that's designed to be horrible like this one is, but not very typical to be seen, you can think you have an okay signal. And so again, it goes back to, if you're in this kind of a mode on this kind of a scope, you can be there for, you know, this kind of a mode on a scope, you can be there for an hour, hour or two before you actually see a glitch. This one, it might, you know, depend on how often the glitch is occurring, of course. But this one, if you like say you had a glitch that's truly occurring once every second, this scope, you know, you might see it after 3 or 4 seconds, or maybe 10 seconds. Who knows what the probability of, you know, whatever they call it, intersection or whatever. On this scope, it might be more like, you know, a minute. And, you know, and this again is back into seconds or so for this guy in the back. So, anyhow, just some comparison thoughts for someone who might be thinking about purchasing a home oscilloscope on a budget. These guys are, you know, entry level. You know, I don't really, advocate necessarily going out for 4 channels. I think the 2-channel scopes for most people are just fine. You pay a premium on the number of channels that your scope has that they can run at the same time, but you pay a bigger premium on bandwidth. And every one of these scopes you see before you is in fact 500 megahertz capable. It's just a question of how these scopes, they were all 500 megahertz. These, they configured them from anywhere from 100, 200, 300, 500. And these, I think in the back were, I think it was just 100, 300, or 500. Something like that. So anyhow, hope you saw something a little bit different. Give you something to think about if you're actually thinking about getting a nice starter scope. I think that these, though, are the fantastic deals right now. These things in the back, though, the 3000s, people are more aware of the TDS 3000s and less aware of the DPO 3000s, and so you can get the DPO 3000s at a pretty decent price. If anything, the last year I'd say the TDS 3000s have actually gone up in price. Doesn't make any sense at all. It's just because I think awareness. And these guys are dropping in value pretty fast. I mean, you still have, you can probably find on eBay right now someone asking for a 744, $5,000-$6,000 for sure, but I think you could probably acquire one for well under 750. And you just have to be willing on this type of a scope. You have to be willing to work on the attenuators to make them work correctly. On this type of a scope, much more problematic. You're going to need a greater skill set to be able to repair this if it's not turning on and so forth. I mean, you could get lucky and something's unplugged, but usually when a connector's unplugged in one of these, it had been to a service center and they unplugged it to just obviously say, hey, this thing don't work, so, and attenuators on these are really dodgy to work on because they got a zillion pins soldered to the motherboard, and it's really tough to do anything about attenuator problem. And I think on the Bs, sometimes these guys kick the bucket early. They forget how to boot, and the boot sequence in the chip and how to get it there is almost a corporate tech secret. And so basically the battery backed up NVRAM turns into a guarantee that the thing is going to die eventually. And on the DPOs, they haven't been around long enough to know if that's the case, but I kind of doubt it. I think they've gotten enough grief about NVRAM battery issues on their user forums, for example, where they probably aren't too keen on continuing with that. Come on, tech. Don't put anything on NVRAM memory that the user can't at one point replace. That's just totally flaky. And expecting them to send it to you guys to charge an obscene amount of money to put a new chip in and to send a simple GPIP command to reset everything, it's ridiculous. Anyhow, folks, talk to you later. Bye now. And lastly, if you got around $2,000 to spend, instead of getting something small and compact that could do decoding like that, you can go for like a TDS 7054. This is 500 megahertz. This thing would have been brand new in around 2000, 2001. And I have the horizontal acquisition control thing up right now. High resolutions, doesn't like that one. Various things you can play with. Let's see. If we would go to the display setup. And let's see, colors. Right now it's temperature grading. We can switch it to very much like the display that one had. The scope will do temperature grading though. Usually you'll use that. But some people like more of a green, spectral, gray for some applications. And this is user definable. But anyway, spectral. Kind of cool. What is it? There you are, and you see the same 8 levels there. Around $2,000, but pretty big. You can hear the fans more so. It's not a way loud scope. One thing they did do on the DPO 7000s is they made the fans way quieter. But any sort of noise is too much as you get older. Alright, I'll let you go then. Just thought I'd put this out there since I had one. I thought, what the hell. I suppose it's worth noting that if you do take it out of InstaView or Fast Acquisition, you can set the scope up, the TDS 744, so it does something like that. So you do see the signal detail, but of course the update rate is nowhere near what it would be if it was Fast Acquisition on the other scopes. But I guess this is a way where you can see that signal quality. This entry-level scope can kind of do it. That's about as good as it gets.